21 grams. So then how much of that is fueled by creativity? How much weight do the elements that comprise this creativity hold? This is the show that welcomes those questions, and luckily we have the guests to answer them here today. Welcome to 21 Grams.
Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to 21 Grams. I'm your host, Joe Compton, and I have with me the amazing, just awesome author, Mr. P.D. Alleva. Tell everybody a little about yourself, sir.
Piv, thank you for having me on, Joe. I love being here. So, name is P.D. Alleva. I write horror novels. I got a new one comes out next week. Holy cow. Yeah, next week called Gollum. All right, psychological horror novel. And I also write dystopian sci-fi about alien vampires attempting to subjugate the human population after World War III. And that series is called The Rose. Volume 1 came out last year. Volume 2, it's December 21st. What's funny, I've been telling everybody December 19th. I'm like, no, December 21st. It's a Tuesday. So yeah, that's me. And I'm also a psychologist, hypnotherapist. So, and what I noticed is within the intro, my picture, I definitely need to update my picture because obviously I got a big beard now. I'm looking at myself. I'm like, wow, you look a lot younger. So maybe you should change that. Reflect the beard. Go beard, you know?
Yeah, age does that to a person, right?
That it does. And I hate taking pictures. That picture, I took like 30 or 40 different pictures, and it's all about the camera angles. You know? It's like my double chin kept popping up, so I had to take it like this just to get that out of the way. So it looked good.
Oh, man. That's funny. Pictures are interesting for sure. I'm really super glad you're here, and we're gonna delve into a topic that I know is near and dear to your heart, and it's something that I think you of all people are probably I hate to put you on the spot and say you're an expert at, but you really are somebody who has a lot of knowledge in this idea that we're going to explore tonight. So I'm real excited about that.
Thank you. We're glad to be here. It is psychology has been so near and dear to me for so long. I'm very happy to be here and discuss this. And I get this question all the time. And honestly, I always answer it, obviously, and it's always like fly by the seat of my pants type of stuff. So this time when you sent me the topic, I said, maybe I should write some notes down or whatever. So I have some notes in an email I have on my phone in case I get stumped. So if I look over here, you know what I'm doing.
Nice.
Right?
Nice. So are we gonna quote some Charles Jung or go deep with some Freud tonight? Is that the plan?
Mr. Freud. Oh, a little bit, yeah. We're going to talk about more like ego and belief systems and how the mind works.
I'm curious to start things off. At what point in your process do you start getting into your characters' heads?
Almost from the beginning. All right, so this is how the process works for me. I come up with, all right, this is the book I want to write, whether it's sci-fi or horror, right? And that kind of starts with an emotion that's pretty much based on past experience from something else I read. It could be like Frankenstein, could be Star Wars, whatever it is, something else out there. And I'm like, all right, so I want to write a book with kind of like that. And then the characters start to come in, all right? And when I'm doing my characters, it's what is the basis? What is the theme of this story, right? So what is the theme? What do I need to portray? What do I want to get out there? How's the story progress? And what are the characters that are going to drive it there? And then I started thinking about my characters. So to answer your question, probably very, very, very soon. It kind of depends. I'll have a thought about something I wanted to write 20 years ago, and just sat down, which is case in point, Gollum. I've been wanting to write this book for 20 years. It first popped into my head, had no idea what it was going to become. Time goes by, you pick up this, you pick up that, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I got my story. I got the basis of the story. Now let's start adding the characters. And then the characters kind of come into it. At least the main character. Your side characters kind of pop up as you're writing. But the main character, definitely, they're there in the beginning.
How deep do you go? How deep do you go with the side characters? Are you giving them full workup as well, or is it usually just the protagonist and antagonist that you tackle?
So I write multiple points of view. All right, so you'll get, and it depends on the novel. Like with the Rose, I'd say that, let's see, Sonos, Gray, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's like 8 characters that you actually get into their point of view during that story. With Gollum, it was 3 main characters. All right. And then Rose Volume 2, same thing, same 6 to 8 characters. And then when I wrote Jiggly Spot in the Zero Intellect, which is another horror novel of mine, that was a lot of characters. That was like 10 different characters. And Jiggly Spot first turned out I was going to do a novella. That was it. I didn't want to write this big novel. I just wrote Gollum, 115,000 words. And I'm like, all right, just do a quick little like horror novella. And it turned out to be 150,000 words. And that's because the characters, I originally started with Jiggly Spot and one other character named Tyler. Those were my 2 main guys. And then the story characters kept coming. They kept coming out. And I'm like, well, I need to feature this person as well because they're such an integral part of the story. So that kind of developed from there.
When you're revisiting characters like in The Rose Part 2, are you changing your approach to how you look at their psychology because they have evolved and they have grown? Because that's part of writing, right? They go through a 3-act process. And so in that they change and they evolve or they devolve, whichever way you want to go with that. Right. But is there a different approach for you in terms of their own psychology for the second one? Or is it just, picking up where you left off and kind of even evolving that?
All right, so it's a little bit of both. Everybody changes through experience, right? So there's got to be a change in your character. Whatever happened in Part 1, obviously it ended in some way, some form or fashion. There were winners and losers on both sides, right? So how did those characters react to that loss or that that victory? Mm-hmm. How did they get through that, and what's the change, the internal change that comes from within? Either more ego or less ego, right? Or in the case of the villain, they lost, so they're pissed. They want to get back there and make sure they get back at the hero. So yes, definitely that psychology does change, where the villain in the first one for the Rose Volume 1 is Sano, and he is in the second one too. But he's the main villain there, and when he first starts, he's got this attitude about him, and that attitude progressed, throughout the entire novel until the end. And then when he came back in Volume 2, because of what happened, all right, so his psychology kind of went to the 10th degree at that point. Not only is he a vicious, treacherous, manipulative villain, but now he's just taken that to the nth degree and has included complete demolition and destruction of everyone, including his own species. So that evolution has definitely come through in that way.
When it comes to the setting and the story itself, is there a blending with the characters, or do you kind of separate the elements and write them as such and then kind of try to put them together like chocolate and peanut butter, or or do they stay layered? Do you have different layers for each idea?
Right, so with regards to setting, like in Gollum, right, the setting had to be more gothic. You're writing a horror novel that takes place in the 40s and 50s. So to me, that setting had to match the personality of the characters who were within it. All right, so it takes on the characterization of Gollum and Alina, the 2 main characters that are in that book. To me, even with the Rose Volume 1, the vampires live in Hollow Earth. All right, so they're vampires. They can't be living up on on land, so they're living down in Hollow Earth. So how does that play into not only them as characters, but as a species as well? And a lot of great fun that I had with Volume 2 was creating an alien vampire species, a whole race, including the background, and their species is just as mysterious as our background, so I kind of threw that in there. And one of my favorite scenes is when Sanos is having a memory, because the alien vampires have been on Earth for hundreds of years. And he was having a memory, of how he wishes it was like the old days, when they would like hide, there were cottages, human beings in cottages, and they would hide and be these monsters. And they loved it, because it was that fear that they were putting into their victims is what really got their goat, the blood tasted better back then than it does now, when they have like servants who are humans, that they breed on their own to, satisfy that blood craving. So that history goes into motivation for your clients as well. What have they been through, and what are their experiences in their past life that brings them to their motivation, in today, in the current times.
I'm also curious, so it sounds like mostly that the setting, you view that as its own character, or do you feel like it's more of a cause and effect to the characters themselves?
I view it as its own character. Yes, definitely. And in case in point with Gollum, so in Gollum, there's a hotel that is in New York City. All right. And I based this hotel. It's called the Clairfield in the novel. But I found this through research. I'm researching 1940s, 1950s New York, and I found this hotel called the Claremont Inn, which is on the Upper East Side in Harlem, off of Riverside Drive. And it fit perfectly in to the novel and what was happening, including its history and its demise and everything. It was like perfect. It was like, thank you, hit the nail on the head. But I wanted it to have its own personality. It's like the house in Amityville Horror has its own personality. So people, places, things, and especially where you're living, yes, it takes on the personality of the people who are living within it. 100%. So I definitely wanted it to stand on its own as this, especially the Claremont Inn, this gothic horror type of, old mansion, castle, whatever you want to be. But obviously it's in New York, so it's not a castle. But that's the meaning I wanted to portray in that novel. So yes, definitely, it should take on a place of its own. In The Rose Volume 1, the city itself, the Silver City in Hollow Earth, that's Drock City, that had to take on a place of its own personality. And then where the rebels are living, they're kind of living in underground little hut caves or whatever. That had to have its own personality. And when I was writing that, it was when they enter into the compound or whatever, in their little hut caves, I needed there's a waterfall going on, and there's all this, beautiful foliage and everything, and plants growing and everything. How did they grow, right? So their sunlight comes in during the day through these little like caverns in there, and it allows all this life to grow. So I wanted that to have its own personality too.
That's awesome. I love that. And then bringing it all together, it's kind of it becomes kind of like a jigsaw puzzle in that respect.
That it does. I love putting the pieces of the puzzle together, though.
That's awesome.
Right.
I'm curious how much external appearance matters for you in developing psychology. Is that just as important as the internal, you think?
External appearance as far as like the way the character is looking themselves.
Mm-hmm. More of like, when you're describing it as the writer to the audience kind of idea.
Yes, 100%. What does your classic hero look like? How is their face chiseled? They're obviously a little bit buff. If it's a martial arts guy, they're going to be a little bit, slimmed down and stuff like that, but they're going to kick ass. So that external way that you're describing the client should reflect what's going on internally.
Same with
even facial expressions and gestures as well. I think that's a huge part of character development. How do they present themselves? How do they talk? How do they speak? I'm Italian. I'm talking with my hands. Little things like that mean everything.
And even the settings too. You think that's important to show the little cracks and the things that might turn out to be Easter eggs as well. For what you're going to do.
Yes, I think that's highly. I think it's as highly important as like the characters in the story. You need to put them in the setting. You need to make it believable. And whenever story you're writing, that theme and personality needs to transfer over to your world building. A huge part of world building.
Are colors a big thing for you? And how do you use them?
Colors are not a huge thing for colors, all right? Although I do use colors. What I think I use even more is weather, all right?
Interesting.
Well, yeah, what is the weather like? It's with Gollum, like when the Gollem is born, and Gollum he gets is this evil spirit from Shabalba that gets incarnated into this statue, right? And he gets incarnated on a night, and this is why I love research too. So December 26th, 1947, a blizzard hit New York that shut down all of New York City. So when I was researching that, I thought this is perfect. It's perfect for him to be born during a snowstorm after Christmas. I thought it was fantastic, right? So put that weather in there. And this I get from F. Scott Fitzgerald in The Great Gatsby. You know, he was perfect. He was beautiful in the way that he wrote the weather into what was going on, and into not only that, the strain his characters were going through too. It's like that summer heat, you know, especially back then, there's no AC. You know, they're dabbing all the sweat off of them, and what's going on in the story at that point is this immense anxiety that everybody is feeling. So that weather component could definitely add to the mood of your characters and the story that you want to portray.
That's awesome. What does dialogue do for you in terms of the psychology? Is this something you use more than description, you think?
I do use a lot of description, I will say that. Especially with Gollum, there's a lot of description in there. But I love dialogue because it moves the story. But I also love dialogue because it gives you the tidbits into what they're thinking, you know, those actual thought processes and how they're presenting themselves. So 100% on dialogue. And with Gollum is the type of person who loves giving speeches. Mm-hmm. All right. So he gives a lot of speeches in that book too. And he loves his little speeches. I even make fun of it in the book where he even says at a certain point, you know how I love giving my speeches, and he rants and he raves, you know, and he has to circle everything back because he kind of loses track of what is going on, but it's all sinister to begin with. And then he just brings it back to just being the evil maniacal person or demon that he is. So I love that because it does bring depth into the character because you know exactly what they're thinking, and that dialogue, the way we speak to each other and the way we speak about ourselves comes out, right? So it's an internal to ourselves and what's going on in here and in here. You know, it's like a con man, right? So Gollum is based on, like, I took a lot of his characteristics and the way he manipulates everybody through just past experiences with a lot of con men. You know, they'll gaslight you up the yin yang all the time. They love to gaslight. But then if you do something with your like little toe, or somebody does something against you, they're completely on your side. And as soon as you say something they don't like, they'll just berate you and go after you. And a second later, they'll be your best friend.
Do you use dialogue a lot of times to reveal things about characters that you want people to know, or do you think that's more in your descriptions?
I would say it's more in the description, but I do believe when it is said in dialogue, it's more profound. So it's in there too, right? So it's kind of a case in point. You know, what movie is this from? Luke, I am your father, right? Ignited an entire series, everything, right? That movie made it. I always say, what would Star Wars be if Empire Strikes Back was horrible?
Right.
It'd be nowhere. You'd have a great first movie and then they die, right?
Yeah.
So in that one line is what pulled that movie through. You had people for years say, is he his father? We couldn't believe it, right? Until Return of the Jedi came out. He can't be his father. That's just wrong. He's manipulating, right? It was this big thing where that's all people talked about for a long period of time, trying to find out if or Darth Vader is his father. Phenomenal.
That's awesome.
It still gives me chills.
Me too.
Right?
It's very interesting. Yeah, and you're right. There was a lot of, this was even before the internet, so there was a lot of chatter about that idea. So and how that was like just out of left field almost, you know.
Yes,
but if you go back and watch the movies, it's not so much out of left field as you think it is. That's the interesting thing too. Like Lucas was able to set it up so that, you know, there was breadcrumbs toward it. So
correct,
which is interesting as well. Do you think? What do you think in your own writing is the key to developing a character's inner monologue?
What do I think in my own writing is the key to developing characters in? I lost the last word.
Inner monologue.
Inner monologue.
I'm sure you do a lot of reflecting in because you, like you said, you do it from multiple points of view, and I'm sure that characters have times where they reflect on themselves.
It's all right. So psychologically speaking, right? So everybody has a belief system, right? And our belief system is based on our experiences. Mm-hmm. Right. So, what is the experiences that my characters or any character has had in the past? Right. What is the experience that has led to the belief system that they're struggling with right now? Mm-hmm. Right. Or what are those experiences? Right. So, bring those experiences into the present, and you get your inner monologue, but inner, like, what is their motivation? Right. What's making their tick? Why are they having these thoughts, and why are they reacting to this situation where maybe somebody else could be completely different, acting at it completely differently? Having that background gives you the motivation, it gives you the intention behind their thoughts. And that's something that the reader can connect with at that point, right? It's like, I always say there's 3 types of people, right? So type of person that gets a strong knot in their stomach real quick, right? They look over, right? And they see a sweaty toothed madman, right? Running after them. And they get that knot in their stomach and they completely freeze.
Yeah.
Right. And that's based on a past experience. That's why they're like that. Mm-hmm. And then you get another person too, get the same knot in their stomach. Boom, they're gone. Right. Mm-hmm. You can't, oh, where are you going? They're out of the.
Let's stick around to see how this turns out.
Exactly. And then you got the third person gets that same knot in their stomach, and they're like, "Come on, mother!" I almost cursed. Right? Come on, let's go. Right? And they just go completely after the person. It's the same sensation in this past experience. They're doing 3 completely different things. Right? So based on the past experience of the characters, why are they doing this and that in this moment, and why are they reacting to this situation in the way that they're reacting to it?
Yeah, Anita said the Star Wars water cooler talk. Yeah, exactly, the water cooler talk. You know,
and that was water cooler talk, right?
I was thinking about the inner monologue too, and in terms of Star Wars, and you know, even though we get this visceral response from Luke, who's like, you know, denying it the entire time, in the back of his mind, you know, it's like Vader says, "Search your feelings, you know it to be true." And in the back of his mind, he knows it to be true, and it's kind of this. There's this interesting way it ends with this introspective where they're looking out over the stars in space, and it's kind of like at that point, wouldn't it be cool to know what he was thinking about, right?
Yeah, that it would. You know, is he my father? I know he's my father. What do I got to do now? You know, right. He does know that he's his father at that point.
But there's this interesting calm in that moment too, which I think is very visceral and very. It's very you absorb it so much because it's just like. It's not an ending, but it seems it's a beginning. But it seems like there's a closed chapter to him being a youth, and this is kind of his adult swing, right? Kind of idea.
Fact, 100%. I mean, when I wrote the last sentence of the Rose Volume 1 and Volume 2, that movie, Empire Strikes Back, that last scene is the exact one in my head as I'm writing that, you know. And he's just standing there with Leia at that point, and Lando and Chewie are about to go find, you know, Han Solo.
Yeah.
And he just, they're standing there. They look out, and that's the scene I have in my head for both books.
Yeah,
nice. Dead in there forever.
Are you someone who likes to be vague when it comes to the details, especially when it comes to the psychology aspect of it? Or do you feel like there needs to be more explained because it has to go deeper because it is psychology?
I like that it goes deeper, but I also like to allow the reader to have their own opinion and points of view, right? Mm-hmm. So I won't go too far with or I hope I don't go too far with the actual explanation. You know, you want to present, this is what happened, this is what's going on, this is what they're doing. Okay, so let the reader connect the dots, you know, connect the points. And then as soon as you give a little bit of that background, right? And then you put the situation out there, you lead to this situation that the protagonist is in, the reader completely understands of why they're doing what they're doing. You know,
Mhm.
they're completely aware of why the hero is doing what they're doing in that moment. You know, why they're going to be the hero. You know, it's for this or it's for that, or it's for to save the entire world, or really it's just for what happened with their wife, you know, or what happened with one particular person that they're trying to save, and they can really not care about anything at this moment other than saving that person. But leading them up to there and giving the reader that feedback allows them to say, this is 100% viable. And you know, if I was him, I would be doing the same exact thing.
Hmm. I'm curious, you know, with your background and your studies and everything like that, what have you learned about the human brain, that you feel like has helped you with your own writing?
I think it's the belief system, right? So I watched a TED Talk more than a few years ago, and I use this all the time because I think it's absolutely brilliant. And it was a study that took place over 25 years, right? 25-year study, in which case they met with thousands and thousands of participants. And the purpose of this study was to find out where emotions come from in the brain,
Mm.
right? And all of their study, all their conclusions were overwhelmingly with one reason, one place of where they come from, one answer, and that was that emotions are a guess. Right? They're not built in. Right? They're not already. We're not born with these emotion circuits. They're built over time. All right. So if I experience same thing with those three people we were talking about before, right?
Mhm.
So each one of them had an experience that brought that when they were in that situation, it brought an emotion that allowed them to freeze, flee, or start fighting, right?
Mm.
So when you take that, all right, so emotions are built on a guess. Okay, so how did the mind get there? The mind got there because these experiences happened to this person, which created this belief system. So when you're in that situation, you're, hey, I'm a weakling, I gotta fly, or I'm paralyzed and I can't do anything because I'm scared to death right now and I'm freezing, or I'm the friggin' hero and I'm going to kick this guy's butt. So my freezing friend and my running friend are going to be perfectly fine. Right. And that's just all based on that experience. So I think that is the utmost 100% thing in psychology that I have learned that really goes into the motivations behind all of my characters. That belief system.
Do you think it's a crux that is inherent in you so deeply that it can't be changed? Ultimately, you always go back to that core, or do you think that can evolve?
I think everything can evolve. I think that's why we're here on this planet, is to evolve, each and every one of us individually.
Because that's not a popular opinion amongst psychologists. A lot of times they believe that you usually go back and revert to what you were, you know, born with, or the core that you have, right? So
yes, agreed. That is the more popular philosophy that goes on out there in my field of psychology, right? So, but listen, I always said the field of psychology. I'm not going to make fun of my field of psychology. I love psychology, right? But the field of psychology has taken leaps and bounds over the last decade in understanding more of this type of philosophy, which is backed by research. You know, I always say all therapists should go to an NLP training. And NLP is neuro linguistic programming, which teaches you how the mind works. And when you finally understand how that mind works, how language works, how our mind is constructed between subconscious and conscious mind, you could really do some great work with your patients, 100%. You know, because it is our choices. You know, in the beginning, when you're a kid, you're not making choices. Your parents are making choices, but you're watching them make choices, and you're seeing what kind of choices that they make. So you're obviously, when you get into a situation, the only thing for you to get back on, right, and look back on to make that decision is what you've learned and what they've taught you, right? And it's unfortunate, but if your parents were idiots, then obviously you're going to make some dumb mistakes unless you have the awareness to go ahead and say, hey, that was a dumb mistake. Maybe I should ask other people who I see who are doing the right thing to make that change for yourself, right? So it's getting there. Field of psychology is all right.
I mean, the human brain has been one of those mysteries for a very long time, right?
Yes.
So it's just one of those things. But I asked that question because I'm curious for you in knowing your background and how you, with your patients, go deep into their own psychology and their own cores. how much you with your characters do you develop from? Do you develop a timeline, a family tree? How deeply do you go? I mean, not necessarily to produce in the book, but for just your own peace of mind, the idea of I know so that I can know these characters in the perspective that I know how to know character.
Okay, so I don't do that, right? I don't
Yeah.
get into and write like a biopsychosocial on my characters, right? So, but I do have an uncanny knack to understand the motivation and then understand what the backstory is in my head. So it kind of like sticks there. I don't know, for the rest of my life, maybe. We'll find out when I get older to see if I still remember any of this. Hopefully that would be a good thing. But for the most part, right now, I got a pretty good mind out there. And when I have my characters, it's definitely in my head. I know their backstory and I know their motivation. And that gets me into a loving type of relationship with each one of them, So I want them to do great in their motivation, whether it's like having a child, you have one that's really bad and one that's really good. You still love them both and you want both to do good. Right. So that's the way I kind of feel about my characters. I know their history. I know what makes them tick.
That's cool. Awesome. All right. You ready to do some rapid fire?
Rapid fire. All right, go.
All right. Character of yours you'd like to hypnotize to go deeper with?
Gollum, 100%.
Character trait you lean on the most in your own writing?
Self-deception.
Nice. Most stubborn character you've ever created?
Annette Fleming.
Creepy setting you have had your character. What's the most creepy setting you've had your characters visit?
Sleepy Hollow Cemetery.
Nice.
Right.
Do you like the secrets or the reveals more when you're writing?
When I'm writing, I love the secrets, As a reader, I love the reveal, but when I'm writing, I do love those secrets. So
that's interesting. I like that. All right. Do you like the term speculative fiction?
I do.
You do?
I do like that term.
If someone came to you saying they wanted to study psychology, what's the first book you would recommend they read?
Ooh, it's the first book I would recommend they read. That is a big time loaded question, right? Well, no, I wouldn't say that. Let me think. Can we come back to that one?
Sure.
I want to give a good recommendation out there, and it's probably not a psychology book anyway. So.
There's a follow-up to it, but we'll skip that for now.
Okay.
Besides your characters, what character in print or film do you feel has one of the best psychological profiles you've ever seen or read?
Hannibal Lecter.
Nice. Best classic horror film to watch late at night in the dark?
There's so many of them. Best classic. I mean, let's go. I would say Halloween, but I don't want to go Halloween, right? Because everybody's going to say Halloween, right? So I would say Hellraiser. Or Hellraiser 2. That's some scary shit right there. So.
All right, so let's go back to the book thing. Do you have an idea? I mean, yeah, it's loaded, but where they start is not where they end, right? So
that is a definite fact. You see, I get into like philosophical and spiritual stuff, right?
That's
with
awesome.
Psychology, right? So I could recommend like books of the yin yang. Psychology is more like books in psychology that I've read a shit ton of them. So, but mostly they're like manuals, I guess you would say. What is a great psychology book? If you were to go out there, I would recommend The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which is a phenomenal book. Is it a psychology book? Not really, but it's definitely like self-helping and goes to, the way your mind thinks. That is a great book. Let's see. There's so many. I would say Breaking the Death Habit by Leonard Orr is a phenomenal book. All right. Definitely a good one. Let's see. The Finding of the Third Eye by a lady named Vera Stanley Alder, Alder, right? So The Holographic Universe by Mark Talbot. All right. Phenomenal book. The philosophy is that everything you're seeing is just a projection of your mind. We live in a 2D world, and everything that's here is just a projection. Phenomenal book, which actually is a huge part of why Ancient Aliens kicked off their season, why they got into that. That book by Holographic Universe is hugely known in Ancient Aliens. There's another book called, I'm maybe going off a little bit offline here, right? The Story of Adam and Eve by someone named Chan. This book is phenomenal, right? So, but it's psychology, but it's also about cataclysms. And it was banned by the CIA. So if anybody could get a copy of it, or if you want, you could email me. I found it. It's a PDF. That's the only way you could read this book. And it's absolutely phenomenal. And he goes through the entire history. He's a cataclysmologist, right? So every once in a while, every few thousand years in the history of the earth, there's a huge cataclysm that happens. And he related this to what was actually being written in the Bible. Right.
Wow.
In the Bible, they were explaining each cataclysm, right, between Adam and Eve and then Noah. It's amazing how he pieces all this stuff together. And the reason why the cataclysms happen is because the earth is going through what's called a null zone, Null, null zone in the universe, in the galaxy, right? Because we spin around the galaxy. And every time it goes through this null zone, it melts the the inner core of the earth, and that's what changes it. Creates the cataclysm. Phenomenal. That's a phenomenal book, but that's not psychology. So I went off on a tangent.
So then my follow-up is, if an author comes to you and says, I want to learn more about psychology, is there a particular fiction author you would recommend to them to kind of get their feet wet?
If I want to recommend, well, I would say Silence of the Lambs. Thomas Harris is phenomenal with that regard. Blake Crouch is another author that is phenomenal with character development, especially with his last two books, Dark Matter and Recursion, which are two of my favorite novels at this point. It's like you read those two books and it's like, all right, I got to up my game a little bit, you know? He just raised the bar on what good storytelling is, so we got to kind of follow suit. Those were phenomenal books in the character development, also multiple points of view as well. Nice. So, yeah, he's phenomenal.
All right, last question on the rapid fire. What would you rather your stories be described as? Creepy, smart, or scary?
Smart.
All right.
I do like smart.
Nice. That's awesome. And you blew up the rapid fire, but that's all right. That was beautiful. I loved it.
Thank you.
Okay. So getting back deep into your characters a little bit here before we close out here. Are the protagonist and antagonist profiles different for you, or do they share so many more of the more similarities than they do differences?
They share a lot of similarities, a lot. You know, it's back to the belief system, right? So belief system was created for them, both of these characters, right, to believe that they're the hero. Right, so you got Sanos, the alien vampire, thinks that he's the hero, and then you got Phil, the rebel freedom fighter. He thinks that he's the hero based on who raised them. You know, what type of environment were they raised in? And it's the same thing. They both think that they're the hero. They both think that they're doing the right thing for their people. You know, so I think it's very similar.
Mm-hmm. Where does it shift in psychology then to kind of separate the two? Where do you feel like what is the momentum that you use to kind of separate the two?
Kind of like the manner in which they fight, the manner and reasons why they're fighting. Whereas, like, well, yes, because with Sanos, he's fighting more for himself, right? Whereas the hero Phil, he's fighting for not only for himself, obviously, you have to, you know, someone's about to kill you, you got alien vampires trying to destroy you, but he's fighting for this cause, you know? So he's got the cause where Sanos has his own cause. It's all internal. It's all about his ego and what he wants.
Is psychology more about how you deal with the dark than it is the light, or is there an even balance, or does one tilt to the other side? Maybe is it the opposite, how you deal with the light instead of the dark? Where do you feel like psychology tilts?
It's the yin and yang, right?
Yeah. So balance.
Exactly. It's the balance between the two. But everything look at the yin and yang, right? The white has the black circle in it, and the black has the white circle in it. They coexist. Some people or some creatures or some species are more on the dark side, whereas others are more on the light side. But each one of them has that part of them that does exist, whether they see it or discover it or aware of it or not.
I know so many authors and, so many filmmakers and creators and storytellers, and the darkness seems to always call them. Like, that's where they seem to have the most fun, enjoyment in that aspect. And from a psychology standpoint, there's so many reasons why and so many ideas why and all of that. But for you, somebody who studies psychology, who's rooted in it, who knows where those motivations lie and kind of have self-identified it for yourself, how do you tap into darkness? Is it enjoyable for you still, or do you feel like it's more clinical at this point in writing?
I know it's enjoyable.
Yeah,
I love it. I grew up a little bit on the dark side. Let's just put it that way, And my wife says to me, you're never better than when you're writing. It's like when you're writing, it's like the demons want to come out, right? And then they come out and they have nowhere else to go, so they come out in your head. So whatever. So I definitely love the dark side. I love digging into it 100%. It gets my goat and it puts everything on the page. And then I could go and be, hubby and, dad of the year or whatever.
But does it make it easy? Do you think because of your background, it makes it easier to tap into the light a lot more than the dark?
Yes. Yeah, that is 100%. I don't get consumed by it. I believe in balance, and balance is something that we need to live on a more of a daily, weekly basis than waiting for, hey, I'm taking vacation in a couple months, I'll sleep then and I'll relax then. And then you get to that vacation, and for the whole vacation, you're just wiped out and tired. It's because all the stress is coming out. Right? It's all coming out. So it's just tapping your energy. But when we lead a life that's daily balance or weekly balance, getting those things done that we know work for us, when we do take that vacation, we're ready to go from day one. We're having a great vacation.
What do you think is a key mistake you see other authors make when it comes to human behavior?
Okay.
You don't have to call anybody out on this. I'm just, this is a generalization, really.
Okay, so I think that they get the psychology wrong as far as, like, first of all, motivation, right? It's like, no, somebody wouldn't do that. But what I don't like, personally speaking, is when somebody writes something that's like a psychological thriller. And to me, they get little tidbits in there, but the psychology is just wrong to me, And that I'll go with The Silent Patient on that one. The psychology was great. Like, he was doing good, and then he completely screwed it up at the end. It's like, there's no way in hell that's going to happen, right? In a psychological aspect, there's no way in hell that what happens at the end of, I don't want to give a spoiler away, what happens at the end of that book is not going to happen. You're not going to have, that patient at the end of that book is not even, she's incoherent at that point. What you said that she's doing at that point, it cannot happen. And that kind of upsets me. I do like it when the research goes out there. What is the, I can't remember the lady's names. An anonymous girl and something wife. I can't remember but an anonymous girl, right? With a phenomenal book written by two ladies, right? They had the psychology down pat. Loved it. I did love it, 100%.
Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekin.
Yes. That's right. And what's the first one? The other one with the wife, what's it called again?
I don't know. I just looked it up. So
okay.
I don't know these. Let me see if
the other wife, something like that. But those two books were phenomenal. I haven't read their third one yet.
The Wife Between Us?
The Wife Between Us, I think, was the first book they read, and then The Anonymous Girl was the second one that they wrote. And then there was a third one. The third one I haven't read. But An Anonymous Girl, I read The Wife Between Us, and that was a little bit of a stretch, right? But Anonymous Girl, they had it down pat 100%. They hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I have the same problem. There's a specific book that I have a similar problem with in that idea. And I'll go ahead and say it, even though it's a traditional author, and I don't really want to shit on traditional authors either, but The Girl in the Train really did that for me. There's no way that outcome could have been the way it was. It just seems so, I mean, there's there's trickery, right? There's trick endings, there's reveals and secrets and twists and turns, but they all have to make sense, don't they? I mean, if you go off the rail and it doesn't work, it's very noticeable, right?
Correct. Agreed, 100%. There has to be something drastic. Really has to. What's funny is I was started to read that book, and I didn't like it. It was a DNF. Did not finish type of book.
A favor.
I was like, nah, I can't get into this 100%. It's like, and not only that, it's like sometimes I'll read a book that I'm pretty sure is going to be good, I'm going to like, but because I'm writing a different type of book, it's like I'll put it down and I'll come back to it later. But I'm writing that type of book, and I need that. But yeah, definitely.
I mean, as far as psychology goes, in terms of developing things, you also evolve as a person, and I'm curious, as authors who aren't as versed in psychology, we all feel it. You mentioned it earlier. You're much better the more you write, and the next book is better than the first book, and so on and so forth. And that's just that's an author thing, really. And all authors feel that way. If they don't, they're not evolving, and there's something, probably they're stuck or something to that effect. But I'm wondering, from a psychology standpoint, how you reconcile with that. Is that something you embrace? Is that something that you go? And then, of course, as we evolve as authors too, we look back a little bit and see, and if they really like it, you kind of cringe a little bit because you go, oh, that's so bad, But from a psychologist standpoint, knowing that you're going to grow and evolve, do you have, is there an acceptance level for you that probably doesn't exist for other people, you think?
Is there an acceptance level that doesn't exist for other people? I think so. I mean, I don't know other people, but speaking for myself, I'll accept everything as it goes on. I love change. Bring it on, right? So I want to evolve as that writer. I want to be the best I possibly can, and wherever that takes me, I'm good with it. Bring it on, right? So the written word, it's that. To me, it's all about the passion of creativity and putting it out there, and the connection towards other human beings and other readers who are there is what I'm looking for. So that's going to connect, and that's going to evolve with me no matter where I go.
How do you compartmentalize your own psychology when you're digging deep into another psychology that doesn't exist?
I look at it like it's a patient. Right? So I don't get personally involved in what's going on. I don't take it with me. It's same thing when I'm seeing patients. I could go and see 10 patients in one day, and you're on a roller coaster ride of emotions with those patients, because obviously they're coming to see you for that reason. They're on an emotional roller coaster ride. When we take on that type of energy, right? So, but at the end of the day, it stays there. It stays in the office. You can't take that home with you. By the time you walk through your door, you have to be completely focused on what's going on at home, right? And it's the same thing with writing. As soon as Ernest Hemingway was great at this, right? I watched the documentary about him earlier. He would write in the morning, and everyone said the same thing. Once he was done for the day, it was over. It was him and his kids or whatever else he was doing at that point. It's over. He's not going back to it. He's not worrying about it and coming up with it. Where am I going to go with this tomorrow or this tomorrow? No. He did his writing, done for the day. Boom. Go play with the kids. Or for him, go to Sloppy Joe's and steal urine.
Or dig deep into the booth.
Exactly.
So last question for you. Kind of take us through your evolution as an author. Tell us about where you started and where you are now, and how the psychology has changed in each book for you, and you looking at them.
Okay, so let's start with, all right, so first, I've been writing since I was like knee-high to a grasshopper. But let's not start there. Let's start with kind of first, because I've written so many books, right? But none of them are published, right? They're poems, with short stories. I mean, this list goes on and on. But as far as first published book, which is Indifference, which is kind of like my Catcher in the Rye with supernatural themes, I guess you could say, right? So I think the biggest evolution that I've had or gone through with my writing is optimism turning into more realism, I guess you could say. It used to be the people who refer to me as the eternal optimist, So in my younger, more vulnerable days. And I think you see that come out a lot in those earlier novels, especially in Difference and then A Billion Tiny Moments in Time, which I call my Hallmark movie, right? So it's a sweet little family saga, right? And the optimism that's there, like in Difference, is about a misdiagnosed paranoid schizophrenic who discovers he has the powers to heal, And it's like, I wanted to heal the world. Everybody heal the world. And now with these books, you're talking about dystopian, people are dying, demons are taking over the world. So that like change over to that more dark side has definitely happened, even though with both Indifference and A Billion Tiny Moments in Time, you'll see that metaphysical and that darkness is in there. It's kind of like the yin and yang, right? Whereas those were more white with a little bit of darkness. These are more dark with a little bit of light.
and Gollum is about to come out, and
Yes.
we're about to experience Gollum. To give us a little bit about what Gollum is, and I said that was the last question, but I lied. But so this is, tell us a little bit about Gollum and give us some insight into Gollum,
Nice.
what we're about to experience.
All right, so Gollum takes place in the, I think I said it before, but late 1940s, early 1950s New York. And it starts in 1951. And this new detective, he was a war hero in World War II. He was just a regular police officer. He just made detective. And he gets his first assignment. And his first assignment is to find the district attorney's missing daughter. But it's kind of a cold case. She's been missing for a couple years at this point. But what happens is they receive the new lead, all right? And the lead comes from this high society sculptor and socialite named Alina Francone. However, Alina has also been committed to Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital for the past 6-7 months at this point. And what happens is he has to go and talk to Alina, and when he's there, Alina tells him the story of Gollum, a demonic force she incarnated into a statue in 1947, who has infiltrated every aspect of New York's infrastructure and is using orphans to serve as bodily hosts for his demonic army from Shabalba. Hence, the story just keeps going. What happens is Alina tells the story, and that's when you get into 1947. It's her point of view, right? And then, of course, her story ends, and then the conclusion happens in 1951.
Nice. How many words is it?
115,000.
Wow, man! Wow. Is that the most you've gone to, or is the Rose bigger?
The Rose Volume 2 is 100. The Volume 1 was 95,000. Volume 2 119,000. But Jiggly Spot and the Zero Intellect is 150,000.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a big boy. That took me 6 months to write. That was during like all COVID quarantine, and I had a great time with Jiggly, although he drove me insane for 6 months. Yeah, he did.
Was it him, or was it the enclosure that you were experiencing with the?
It wasn't. I got kind of, I would say, lucky right during that COVID quarantine because I was an essential worker. Right. So I went up to a treatment center. I was helping give trauma therapy and therapy to the patients that were up there for drug treatment. So I was kind of like the guy who was the essential worker. And honestly, there's nothing like being on the highway doing like 110 miles an hour and nobody's there. And you feel like you're in a dystopian society. And then I had The Rose coming out, which is a dystopian book. So kind of like the energy, I was enjoying myself. But no, Jiggly Spot drove me insane because Jiggly Spot himself is insane. And his cast of characters, I would get to a certain point where Jiggly, I would write something and then I'd have to go back, right? It would sit on, it would be bugging the hell out of me for days, right? And I would go back and do a rewrite and not understand why the rewrite was happening. And then all of a sudden I would be rewriting and then another thought would pop into my head. It's like Jiggly Spot himself is a real entity from somewhere in outer space that is sending me signals or something. And the answer would drop into my mind and I'd be like, oh, that's why we're doing this. And I'd keep going. So that's how he drove me crazy.
Wow. Well,
jiggy.
we'll look forward to that for sure. Tell everybody where they can get some of these great books that you have out now and coming around.
All right, phenomenal. All right, so obviously Amazon, pdalleva.com. You'll find Gollum's up for pre-order. Rose Volume 1 is there. We'll be up for Volume 2 pre-order as well. Definitely, it's on Barnes & Noble, Kobo as well. Roses, Gollum will be as well, Rose Volume 2. And then best way to get in touch with me is go to my website, we're right here. No, we're on this side. There we go, pdalleva.com. And sign up for my newsletter. I send that out once a month. Best way to get in touch. And then also, I have a couple months ago, we created a Facebook reader group and book club. So if you like book clubs, you like free books, that's on Facebook. Type in PD Alleva's Book Club. It'll come up. And we're reading Gollum right now in the book club. And then we're going to be reading The Rose Volume 1, followed right after that by Volume 2.
Nice. Awesome. Well, sir, I can't wait to read these books. These sound phenomenal. I thank you so much for taking the time to sit here. And The Rose is on my TBR, so I've got it actually on my Kindle now, so it's there. I'm just got to get to it get through that.
The TBR grows; it never dwindles.
It never,
It never dwindles.
And someday we'll discuss the psychology of that, I'm sure.
Probably called obsession.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. An addiction, right?
Yes. But it's a good addiction, though. It's a healthy one.
Absolutely. And there is such a thing. So,
Yes.
That's
right.
All right, Paul. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Hey, thank you, Joe.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And as it's always time to go indie now, and we'll see you again soon. Next week, actually, 21 grams is off and In Progress starts, and then we go back to 21 grams. So come and check us out in a couple weeks. Till then, we'll see you soon.